Okay, so good evening, guys. So today, Alona and I are going to be the discussants of the presentation that we just had on of Alice Barb. So the documents that we read that were shared with us were relating to citizen mobilization and societal change, why activism works. So we are going to base our discussion today on those. As a brief summary of what we are going to talk about today, we're going to present a brief summary of the three documents that were shared with us. Then we are going to continue with four debatable dimensions. The first two are more theoretical, and the second and the other two are more cases that we wanted to share with you. We are going to close later with open questions. So, as a brief summary, throughout the documents, I don't know if you had time to read them, but we could identify three main ideas. The first one is that Alice opened with the case of the 2024 legislative elections that happened here in France. And she highlights the case of why civil society mobilization was really important during that time. So the far right was like having a lot of chances of winning. So what happened is that a lot of activist groups collaborated in order to mobilize a lot of people in order to be able to win the elections in only 2 weeks. Some of the key strategies that were implemented during those 2 weeks was the first one, empowerment of shared action. Decentralization was key. Even if there was a key strategy and motive that everyone was following, it was very important to empower all of the volunteers that were participating. There was a targeted field strategy, so they had to do an analysis on which districts were like most able to be convinced to vote for not to the left. Also, it was very important, the narrative of victory, like to convince the people that there was actually a possibility to win, to equip the mobilization, and to build strong coalitions with journalists, artists, collectives, and local associations. How she closes this part is that it is important to replicate this model, not only by incentivizing like activists to collaborate with politicians during political seasons, but also throughout all the years. The second point that she highlights is the Estrine system. As she just mentioned, the far right is rising here in France, and it's just not a coincidence. They have been investing a lot of money in different type of projects in all of France. And this system is led by a cohesive group of financial groups, entrepreneurs, think tanks, digital content creators. So she explains a bit about the Estrine system that she didn't like talk about right now. But basically, it's this billionaire that is investing in different type of projects in France, and he operates through three main projects. The first is the Autumn Capital. He has 1.7 billion euros fund in which he's investing in different projects, as I mentioned. The Common Good Foundation that is based on a 2000 year plan. And Plan Pericles, that it has just become public in the past year, I guess, that it has up to now 100 million euros. That is to incentivize schools that are educating people on very conservative ideas.
So in the final section of the paper, the author focuses on the fact that democracy is the highly neglected philanthropic cause. And democracy is underfunded, and for example, in France, less than 2% of the French foundations support democracy. And the problem is that democracy has been taken for granted for the last 80 years. So it has been seen as something stable, that the system will never change it. It doesn't need to be supported. However, over the last 40 years, we can observe the erosion of the democratic principles and also the significant rise of the far right over the last decades. And the far right, they don't emerge like spontaneously. However, they're financed and they're trained, and they succeed pretty much in spreading their ideology through culture, through education, media, influences, etc. And they succeed in conquering public opinion even before the elections happen. So at the final conclusion of the paper, we could define that there is a strong asymmetry, that on the one side we can observe a positive asymmetry, that there is still active civil society mobilization, as we could see in June 2024 during the legislative elections in France. that the society still is able to mobilize in some emergency situations and to combat the far right. However, on the other side, we can see that far right operates through like well-structured foundations, philanthropic foundations, and sustainable network, and they're heavily financed. They don't hesitate in their actions. So here the question arises, like if civil society is active, it can win some little battles, but whether can it win the battles if the whole democracy is not funded, is not supported? So there is a need to redefine the democracy and to have sustained investments in the democracy to have more stable infrastructure. So then coming to the debatable dimensions, as a theoretical framework that could greatly support the whole idea of the paper, we highlighted the Gramsci's cultural hegemony theory. So Gramsci states that power is maintained not through coercion, like through military force, but mostly through the consent of the society. So the power, it is not solely electoral, but it is also cultural, ideological, moral, and the dominant actors, they really gain the power when their values, they start being like normalized in the society, and they start being perceived as normal, and the author claims like as the common sense. And Gramsci defines two strategies of power. It is the war of maneuver, so it's direct assault on the state power, like through elections or coup d'etat, and the war of position, so it is the slow conquest of civil society, like through churches, schools, media, culture. And this is where we can see the reflection of Sterin actions, because he doesn't directly fund like the political parties, but he creates the training institutions like to produce activists. He funds like he creates different schools, he funds media, he funds influencers that promote far right ideas in the social media and so on. So also here we can raise the question whether the pro-democracy actors whether they underestimate the importance of this cultural struggle.
So now moving to the second debatable dimension. So Alice mentions the important that there exists philanthropy for democracy, but philanthropy it exists right now. So some of the papers that we read were talking about how it is important to democratize a bit more the philanthropy structure that right now is governing our world. So the problem that we can see with how philanthropy is right now structured is that foundations are political actors. At the end, they have private money that is invested and produced public outcomes. And they have not only this, but they have tax advantages, and they are built on very few sources of transparency and accountability. So this elite philanthropy violates three democratic principles. The first one has to do with the all affected principle. That means that all those affected by decisions those affected by public decisions should help shape them. In this case, when foundations usually are investing the money, they do not have any saying on how that money is invested. It's a very top-down decision. The second democratic principle that is violated is the non-arbitrary power. So because communities cannot contest and shape the priorities of these foundations, associations, and billionaires, power becomes very paternalistic. That is what has been going on here in France and around the world. And the third principle that is violated with elite philanthropy is provisionality. Usually, in the past decade, I guess, a lot of foundations that have been constituted have permanent foundations, like the case of Sterin plan that it has 2,000 years plan. So when you have these type of mandates, it lock in the foundation's ability to work over the work and evolve throughout the years. So this is also dangerous for the societies. So one of the solutions that we identified to make more democratic the philanthropy foundations is through participatory budgeting. This concept was, at least the authors mentioned that it was born in Brazil, in Porto Alegre in the 80s, as a way to deepen democracy and reduce corruption. So at the end, how this system can be translated to foundations, depending if they are local or they're global, is to have neighborhood assemblies that set needs, propose priorities, or regional assemblies that make the same activities activities and also refine and elect delegates that then can participate in citywide funding forums and decide how to allocate the resources that foundations have available. And then you have a funding council or a foundation board that translate priorities into feasible grants and monitor cycles. So in this way, even if you are not like actually deciding where the these foundations or elite philanthropy allocates the money, you can at least contest how are they doing it. One of the pros of this solution is that it will be a better fit with real needs, how our foundations are working, and reduces wasted relevant projects. And of course, a con is that foundations might not be able to, will not be willing to implement this type of systems. But a way that that the authors proposed on how we can actually enforce this is to use the tax advantages as a leverage to actually make them and oblige them to implement participatory budgeting. It's mine. And the third one is that we wanted to expand on something that Alice already mentioned, that it was the Soran Mamdani win. But we want to bring another approach that we have, that we feel that it has been overlooked. So as a brief context, we already know that it started polling at 1%, and then he became mayor of New York City as he is right now. How he did this, he brought the traditional local election model with less TV politics and more mass participation and a disciplined message. Why this case matters to nowadays is because he reframed local elections as a democracy building project, not just a persuasion campaign. And he showed a replicable insurgent path that is composed by organization infrastructure, coalition expansion, and social media integrated with the field work. So the key strategies that many of us already know that he implemented that worked was the message discipline, affordability for all, expansion of the electorate. He didn't focus only on the democratic voters that were already part of the of New York City, but he expanded to Muslims, South Asian, Latins, and tenants, and not only in speech, but he actually, for example, hired 2,000 volunteers that were speaking Spanish to like generate more a stronger relation with them. Social media that was fed through the ground game also, a small donor fundraising. But the most important thing was the mass field operation. I think we all read that he had more than 100,000 volunteers that knocked $3 million and 2.1 calls. But the truth is that this was not like built like one over the day. It was based principally in coalition with the DSA, that is the Democratic Socialist of America Association. This is a nonprofit foundation, and is the largest socialist organization in the U.S. at national level. And in New York City, it has 8,000 members. It had proven capacity even before this election to run campaigns like the one of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. And it is, in general, an organization and a space for long-term organizing and strategic thinking. So even if like Mad Money was not known, collaborating with this organization that has been building strategies and thinking how to win elections throughout the years, it was really important to win.
Then we would like to use Russia as the case complementing the paper. So Russia is the good example how long-term investments in ideology can help winning the battle over democracy. So in Russia, oligarchs play also an important role in funding the different educational cultural projects promoting the Russian state ideology. But for the note, we don't compare like France and Russia, and like I'm not saying that France is repeating the way of Russia or anything, because like the system is pretty different. Like if in France, the billionaires, they can act more or less like independent actors, shaping the political discourse in the country. But in Russia, the oligarchs, they're embedded in the state power and they're subordinated by the state. So if in 1990s, oligarchs also played an important role in political discourse and they could shape it, but there was still some pluralism. But since 2000s, when Putin came to power, the Russian state cracked down all the oligarchs who were not loyal to the government. So the ones who were too like independent or didn't want to cooperate with the government, basically they were sent to jail or just kicked out of the country. So the oligarchs became embedded deeply in the state power. And the thing is that they do not only like cooperate with the government by investing in the strategic sectors necessary for the Russian geopolitical interests, but also they fund various educational projects helping to promote the Russian state ideology. So they do not like shape the political discourse, but they help the Russian government to reinforce the existing ideology that they promote. And also it is combined that initially Russia had weak civil society, so there was also not like strong resistance from the population. And it also has kind of connection with the Gramsci theory, because the ideology was all these like traditional values, conservatism, patriotism. It was spread that well during all these years that now we can observe that these ideas have become just normalized in the country, and they are perceived by society just as common sense, as from Gramsci's theory. And this led us to the fact that now the majority of Russian population support the government and support the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And as a prominent example, I would mention one of the oligarchs in Russia. His name is Konstantin Malafeev. And he is so-called like orthodox conservative billionaire, and he is the one who is who invests the most actively in the Russian world ideology. So he's so similar to the French Stern, because also he has the yeah, he has his investment fund Fortune, which is called San Basil Foundation, which is similar to Common Good Fund. Also, he and this foundation, it helps to like fund orthodox educational programs, like traditional family values, anti-abortion, anti-LGBT values. Also, he owns his own media. He owns his TV channel called Tsargrad TV. This channel also helps to promote anti-Western and pro-Kremlin narratives. Also, he owns his own think tank, as Sterin does, and he funds also some Orthodox private schools which provide like patriotic education. Also, he funds like youth camps, providing military patriotic training for the youth. So overall, like if the paper that we discussed today about France, it focuses on the fact that like far right, they don't emerge just spontaneously, but it is the result of long-term investments. Then I think like such authoritarian regimes, like they use this logic pretty well and brought it to the function. And now coming to the questions.
Okay. First,
I also forgot to mention that this Malafeev, he also cooperates with far right in Europe, and he also in deep relations with Le Pen, and he helped her to obtain the loan, like huge loan in 2014. It's just interesting fact.
okay, to wrap up this with a few questions. First, we wanted to ask you do you think that philanthropy can realistically be made more democratic? And if there are any approaches you consider credible, or do you think that this idea is fundamentally contradictory? And the second one is that in some of the articles that you shared, you mentioned like this importance of the existence of philanthropy for democracy. So if you could walk us through your vision, how this will work to strengthen democracy?
And our last questions is, could governments regulate philanthropy without restricting the pluralism of ideas?
Thank you. It was very, very sharp. Especially, I enjoyed the fact that we talked about Malofev, because no one knows him, and he's a giant, massive threat. Just a bit of another additional context, because he works a lot with all the far-right billionaires in Europe. And I give you just two numbers. Between 2011 and 2019, there's been 700 million euros spent in Western Europe for anti-gender campaign. Anti-gender means against women and queer. This money mostly comes from Malofev and also Catholic Church. But in the past 5 years, this amount of 700 million passed to 1.2 billion, thanks to Malofev, but also thanks to Sterrin, thanks to more and more and more money that is going to anti-gender campaigns. So if you want to invest, it's a trendy topic, unfortunately, for rich people to invest against democracy, human rights, women's rights. Philanthropy can be made more democratic. I wish, but 97% of philanthropy goes to the Ivy League in the US, for instance. So it's also most of the time for the elite a way to control how things are being done. So philanthropy would always go in the interest of the one who is giving money. Malofev is a philanthropist, Bill Gates is a philanthropist. Sterrin is a philanthropist. We have so many ways of being philanthropists. In in Austria, maybe you heard about this woman, Marlene, I don't remember her family name, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yes, she. She's a great model of philanthropy. She inherited millions from her family, and she decided to give everything. And she created a council, a democratic council based with experts, activists that would actually choose where the money would go. And that's great example. But unfortunately, it's not that trendy. So what I would say, if I walk you through in 2 minutes in my vision of philanthropy, in strengthening democracy. It doesn't mean anything. Philanthropy to strengthen democracy, to me, it's a lot of bullshit words, because unfortunately, you can say that Trump is a big Democrat. You can say that, Putin see himself sometimes as a Democrat. A lot of horrible people would say they would fight for democracy. Actually, Trump loves democracy. He's been elected. So I think that we need to be more offensive in the wording that we use. I use the word democracy so that I can pass along in front of some people that wouldn't call me a leftist. But I think we need to be very courageous, because democracy is not only the word democracy, the principle of voting, the institutions. No, it's fighting to be sure that we keep what we have. And it is, again, very political. So I would say we need a very offensive philanthropy, and not only a democratic one. I wouldn't be in favor, actually, of a big process, very big democratic process everywhere in philanthropy. I would be in favor of shaking the coconut tree of the rich guys that are still have a little bit of soul inside of them, and tell them, you give their money now. Because now, those who are giving money, they have a political interest in having the far right win. And Sterrin has a political interest in having the far right win. It's not that Sterrin woke up one day and said, I'm going to be a super fascist. Okay, he has a weird connection with God and Jesus because he's very radically Catholic, but it's more about money. He wants to be rich. He wants the far right to be in power because he could sell all his companies of his investment fund for a big amount of money. So in the end of the day, money is what you really need to follow. And to conclude, could governments regulate philanthropy without restricting pluralism? You will see that now we have a commission of investigation about that just started, that is about to start, but has been officially published in the news in France last week, launched by the socialists, but it will be also with the right wing, so it would be very interesting because they would call Sterrin, Pierre-Edouard Sterrin, to come. I have the honor of helping them to create this commission. It's a big question because you have philanthropy from the good guy, you have philanthropy from the bad guys. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it always comes to a force of a relation of forces. Who will win, who will lose? So government, it should regulate philanthropy when it comes, for instance, to philanthropy that is supporting anti-abortion organization. Because in France, abortion is in the right to abortion is in the constitution. You are not a philanthropist if you fund anti-abortion organization. But you are a philanthropist if you, support private school that are political academies. The political academies from the far right and my political academies have the same function, basically. We need to support future political leaders. It's good. But the government, I think, should regulate that, but at some point we need to give more power for those who are fighting in favor of the rights that we have, of the constitution, of the rule of law, on international law. Until
Hi. Hi, my name is Marlene. I'm from Austria. I'm here, if you don't see me. Here, hi. I wrote down about 1 million questions, but I'm just going to ask 2 to also have the other people have questions. But thank you very much for the great presentation. It was really inspiring, I think. The 2 questions that are most on top of my head right now of the 100 I have is first about the overtone, the window thing. Because you said it's really important to do it, and I've seen it also in different kind of strategies. For example, in climate activism, also in Austria, we had people like sticking on the street, these kind of things. And at first, I thought it was like a good way to do it, to like shift the window again of what is normal and what is like in the middle of things. But at least in Austria, we had a huge backlash, and it was like kind of corrupting the whole climate movement. So I wanted to ask, like, how do you correctly overtone the window? And second question is about copying far right, because I see that you also find kind of inspiration in how they do things. But I want to understand, like, where do you think are the limits of this, and where do we need to think things different? And yeah, thank you so much.
All right, my name is Luca. My question would be if you could develop a little bit more on the term illiberal that you used, because I know that many people use it, but I'm not 100% sure if I agree with it. I've heard it, but I really would like to hear what you think about it, why you use it, and so on. And yeah, mainly this.
I'm Thiago, I'm from Brazil. First of all, thank you for your presentation. I think it was by far one of the best presentations we had in this cohort. And my question is, right, in your presentation you said that the far right hasn't won, but they work together. And I also think like they work together, but they think together, and they simplify a lot of the things so they can reach the masses. And on our progressive side, some can argue that it's kind of split out in different types of thinking, and it has like it became a challenge on how to reach the masses because it's not unite. So my question is, do you think that is a problem? And if you think that is a problem, how can we solve this? How can we reach as a united thinking to reach them? Thank you.
And we come back to it.
Wow. Thank you for those questions, and thank you for your kind words. I'm very moved. Poof, Overton window. So Trump happened. And that changed everything, I think, in the brain of so many people. You could have lots of fucked up dictators all across the planet, but when it came to Trump, it was really a big, big shake. And at the time Trump was elected, at the same time, there was a program called Brand New Congress that was created by Saikat Chakrabarti. Brand New Congress was designed to support people that would run for elections, and they supported the first cohort, among which only one woman won, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And then they supported other women that actually won, and it became the squad. Saikat Chakrabarti says the Overton window, the polarization is so big, and the Overton window has changed because of Trump coming into power. And so what was left and right became very, very right now, because we have a very radical, horrible far-right person that is now the new normal for the Republicans in the US. So Saikat said, so if we need to do the same thing on the left. So he created Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, she's she's a queen, I love her. But he was a strategist also behind that, and with the squad. And he said, we need to, if the right is even righter, we need to do the same, so to be more radical on the left, so we will actually balance the Overton window. Spoiler, it didn't work. It created more and more and more polarization that never happened. So I don't have a perfect question to answer this question about the Overton window and how us as activists being in the street, like the femen, you mentioned climate activists, the femen, they did a great job on feminism. They arrived, and Ina, the founder, she said, okay, as feminists, no one would listen to us. Men would never listen to us. What would we do for them to listen to us? We will show their boobs. We will show them our boobs. And they arrived there, and now, and I'm sure it happens to most of you. It happens to me so many times. Oh, you're feminist. You're very radical. You show your boobs? Like, because in the mind of so many people, being feminist is like showing their boobs. And it's like, no, you know, they're like different stuff. But it's all about thinking and being strategic about it. I think we need those guys throwing tomatoes on paintings. I think we need them, but they just part of a bigger picture. I had this conversation with a philanthropist. Her name is Danielle Marcovici. She's one of the richest women in France, and she's very old, and she was one of the first to give money to feminists. And I was telling her about Sterrin, Pierre-Edouard Sterrin, and she was like, oh, do you want me to go on TV and say this guy is a horrible person? And I was like, no, you need to continue to give money to the people and just don't say anything. Everyone needs a role. I think that it's good to have activists, people that would enter and shock public opinion. We need that, but we need to always be strategic about what is behind that. Are we prepared for a backlash? How do we organize for a backlash? Do we have the center that would actually support us? Because they play a massive role, the center, when you're being radical. You need to make sure before that they would help you to enter the Overton window. If you are fighting alone as a radical activist throwing tomatoes against a room full of fascists, you will lose. You need to make sure you have money, you have media, you have friends in politics, you have an organization to win. The activist throwing tomatoes on a painting, but also the woman who is refusing to stand up in a bus is just the tip of the iceberg. Because when Rosa Parks refused to stand up, this operation was prepared for like 6 months. There were hundreds of organizers across the country that were preparing it. We're not talking about them, about other women who refused to stand up. We're talking about Rosa Parks, because we need a face. We need people, but you need to be very organized. And when you go, and you need to know that there will be a backlash, and you need to prepare for that. So I hope I answered your question. Luca, on illiberalism, I'm sorry, I'm not a professor at Sciences Po. There are so many articles and so many analyses of that. What I would call illiberal democracy would be Viktor Orban, for instance. It would be any democracy that is about to enter in a phase of not respecting the rule of law, not respecting basic human rights. I mean, I'm very simplist on this. I'm sorry again. I try not to be a professor at Sciences Po because there's so many things that are being written. To me, what is important, very, very important to protect is the law. I am at this stage. I'm like, okay, what is being under attack at the moment by the fascists? The Paris Agreement. The promise that we are not going to burn the planet. I mean, we burn it, but not that much. This is at risk. Same-sex wedding. I have the right to marry whoever I want for like 14 years. That's quite new. So this is what we need to protect. The right of to safe abortion, obviously, the right gender equality, that's the basis. It's in the law. It is illegal to be sexist, to be transphobic, to be homophobic. This is to be racist, to be anti-Semitist. This is illegal. So this is what illiberalism looks like to me, is when those fundamental rights are under attack. And if I have to quote Marine Le Pen for France and the Rassemblement National, their biggest project is to change the constitution, make a referendum that would actually put international treaties under the constitution. So that would actually destroy our commitment for the Paris Agreement, the Geneva Convention, the United Nations, everything that we hold for taken, that we hold for granted. So that would be my personal interpretation of illiberalism, and I'm sure we can go get a beer and have endless conversation about that. Basically, it's my grandmother. Everything I fight against. Santiago, my God, you guys in Brazil, you know. We were with Baptiste, my intern. 2 days ago, we were with a democracy activist from Brazil, and I loved him. He was the general secretary of something called El Pato. I thought this was great. It was before Bolsonaro came into power. 200, no, so at the beginning, 60 civil society organizations gathered and thought, okay, what if democracy is under attack? We need to protect each other. And they created a pact, El Pato, and in the end, there were 200 civil society organizations united to protect the rights of civil society in Brazil. And that's a very good example on how we can strategize and anticipate and be ready for when the dark times are coming. But that wasn't your question, I'm sorry. Yeah. The elite being stupidly smart and snob. It's true, like the far right, they do reels on TikTok and we write op-eds in Le Monde or The Guardian. We don't reach anyone anymore. We want to use the reason against what the far right would call le bon sens, the good sense. This is something that we hear a lot from the far right, and I mean all politicians would say that, oh, le bon sens, the good sense to kick out all the foreigners. Good sense to shut down the border. We have too many immigrants. It's good sense. They would call the good sense. Reason, the good reason. So yeah, I think we need to be more strategic about organizing. And if I was creating a resistance movement, I'm not saying I'm doing it, but if I was doing it, I think there would be 3 massive ways to organize and 3 things to fund, depending on the moment of the year. Let's say if it would differ if we have elections or if we want a topic to be raised in public opinion. We would need first a digital army, a digital response. We need, if we want to resist, and I can tell you because not that I wrote the plan already, but a little bit. We need to make sure that we have people who create and amplify messages online. So because the far right are using the bots, or Putin is using the troll farms, we cannot do that. Not because it's not ethical, I don't care. But because algorithm wouldn't allow us to do that, because algorithm would actually favor the polarization and the hate and horrible stuff. And so if we have an army of people on social media who say good stuff, yeah, the left, oh, we need to win, we will have 2 likes. So if we do it with the bots. So we need real human being volunteers, like, share, and send love. Send love, not hate. The far right and the trolls and all the trolls, they are using hate. They cyber harassed. I've been cyber harassed by 350 people in 1 hour who wanted me dead and to rape me. I mean, this is not how we need to do it. We need to be very ethical on that. We need to send love. We need to make sure the hate is being drawn in the love. And for that, we need a digital army. But we also need hackers, let's be honest. We need anonymous, we need hackers. We need to make sure that their websites are crashing. And I love I don't know if you saw on social media those live hack where you have hackers that are just crashing websites and people are like, yeah, go. So we need to be good at that because they are so good at it. They're so good, they infiltrate Wikipedia. Eric Zemmour, a very far-right person in France, he used 2 administrators from Wikipedia to infiltrate all the pages, including, I don't know, pages about Beyoncé, really, or pages of the Paris Saint-Germain, the soccer team of Paris. And they were day and night during 6 months on those pages to make sure that there would be some small sentence to say, yeah, Beyoncé, she's great, but she's black. So you need to vote for Eric Zemmour because Eric Zemmour said in the news that they would introduce some connections and links. So you need, the first strategy is to be online, digital, and create and amplify messages and hack. The second tool, mobilization. We need people on ground to make sure that we talk to each other, that there is no fake news, that there are human connections. The Rassemblement National in France, Marine Le Pen's party, in their parties, first, on their website, it's written, you want to become member of parliament, write to us. Anyone can say, hey, I want to be member of parliament, and they will say, yeah, let's talk. Try that in any other political party, and I'm sure in all your countries is the same. It's stuck, it's blocked. We cannot enter political parties. They're not inclusive. So that's one thing. We need to be on the ground. We need to mobilize in political party, but also we need to be in the street to talk to each other. When you do campaign for any campaign, political campaign or any topic campaign, let's say for women, for refugees, if you give a leaflet in the street, you have one chance over 4,000 to convince someone. If you talk to someone, you have one chance over 4 to convince the person. So we need database, we need people who are on ground, we need to mobilize. How organizations are mobilizing today, all organizations, they use petition, you register to a newsletter, and then we have the database. In France, we have one organization called Victoire Populaire. They have 500,000 people ready to mobilize like that, with a snap. If we launch them, they would go on the street and talk to people. So mobilization is really a key. They have million, we are million, but we need to be together. And the third strategy is public opinion. How do you infiltrate public opinion? You cannot go in the news and say, I think that today we need to talk about the right for refugees to work. No, you cannot do that. Because journalists actually, maybe they don't want you to talk about this. And if they want you to talk about this, maybe they will show Ahmed, the poor refugee who is starving and doesn't speak good in French. So you cannot control the way media talk about things. Most media are owned by billionaires, so it's a bit complicated to put your agenda. But one example, but there are so many, is that in France now we managed to put fiscal justice on the agenda. Maybe you heard about the tax Zuckman? Yeah. You cannot see one protest in France without his name everywhere. Everybody now in France is talking about la taxe Zuckman. It's Gabriel Zuckman is an economist who wrote his thesis on the fact that billionaires don't pay enough taxes. Like, for instance, Bernard Arnault, the richest man in France, pays less taxes than me. He pays less than 10% taxes. Why? Because they would put their money in their companies instead of on a bank account or buying flats. So he would say we need to tax the companies of those billionaires where they share action. Okay, big. But you can make sure that the topic is so spread by mobilization, civic mobilization, putting pressure on politicians, having petition, collecting data, that at some point the media would talk about your topic. And it's not about pressuring them, it's about making sure that everybody wants them to talk about something.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Silvana from Colombia, and I want to ask your opinion on the role of international organizations in all of this, because for example, when we talk about philanthrocapitalism, kind of the foundations of that was born inside international organizations. The World Bank, the WHO, those were the first organizations that started putting bones into philanthropy activities, like save the refugees, help the poor, bring water to Africa, and those kind of stuff were actually bones to get the rich more rich. And they're still doing that today. And actually, that there's been thousands of papers that shown that has no impact on people's life, of course, because what these organizations need to reach in order to use that money is insane, because of course it only benefits the investors, so the rich people, the ones that own these foundations. So, and that happens in every other sphere that you can imagine. And now I also believe that the perception that we have of international organizations like the NATO, of the UN, is nowhere near what we believe that they were. So what is your opinion into that, and what you think it can be done? Because also this was the kind of the hope, no, to stabilize in crisis situations, and now they're obviously also polarized. Thank you.
Hello, yes, me here. My name is Martina. I'm from Argentina. Thank you so much. This is really, really cool. From my personal point of view, I understand that we need to come up with strategies to survive. There's like a lot going on, but I'm really worried that the things we are doing in the short term are kind of affecting the long term of what we actually want the society to be. Because the Overton window and okay, if they are pushing towards that way, we need to push towards this, and then you end up with more polarization that it's not actually what we want in the long term. And the same with the TikTok debate. I mean, I understand that now we did something like that, but I don't want in the long term for the decision to be made on La Bon Sens. I want decision to be made because we did the research and we took the time. So how can we balance this need for a survival right now without ruining our chance to kind of building an actual democratic debate? Because I would like to debate with your grandma, because I'm sure she doesn't have any interest in the billionaires winning whatever. And I think it can happen. I think it can happen. So, yes.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I'm Sharmeen from Pakistan. And I understand like your point of view, and it was very interesting to hear it from someone in France. But the problem in like countries like Pakistan is that, first of all, who talks about it or who shapes the narrative, even if it's a woman, you have to be very careful, because if it's a woman from the elite society, she's already at a very different point in her life to talk about someone in a village in Pakistan, because they face very different obstacles. Not saying that the elite woman doesn't, because she is a woman. But when in Pakistan, when you talk about these things, you have to be very careful, because of course here there's threat. You talked about how, there's threats to rape and to murder and everything. But there, like, you can see it every day, so it's normalized that someone just throws acid on a group of women marching or something like that. And so my question is that it's so much polarization that even if women come on TV and they try to talk to people or on the street and they try to negotiate with someone in a way that like they try to appease the other person and be like, yeah, I understand your point, but I also feel like women deserve this or someone deserves this. Even that is something that can get them killed, right? So at that point, what do you recommend? Like, is it something that you see that there's need for a revolution? Like something that like, okay, fuck it, I can die, but whatever, I will do it, Like for everyone, I will go out on the streets, and even if I die, it's okay. Or you still recommend that, no, share love, like try to talk nicely or try to have conversations, but that doesn't really work, So yeah, that's my point.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really nice. And I wanted to ask more of a political question, because I wanted to ask your opinion on something. In the beginning of your presentation, you started with the question of whether the US, or in general, a big country, should intervene or not. And you mentioned that the US did not intervene in Syria, But I wanted to ask you that, do you truly believe it's this straightforward? Because if we zoom out, yeah. Ah, okay, but it's also a comment of if we zoom out, like whether they did or not. I'm not questioning whether they should or not. They should. My opinion is that they shouldn't. But because if we zoom out on the whole region, we can easily see that the U.S. does have the whole region in a chokehold. So, for example, at the same time of the Syrian revolution, we were also having our own. My name is Minna from Egypt, so. So we were also having our own revolution, which was actually taken over by the Muslim Brotherhood, and it was not because they were the most politically organized or whatever. It was because they were directly funded by the U.S. And so the reason that we also have Sisi right now is because also a direct result of that. And so the reason why also Egyptians stepped back is because they were very scared that what would happen to us would be what also happened in Syria. So while they might not have directly intervened in Syria, they're the main reason that Syria's biggest ally and the biggest military power in the Arab region is burning down, and we're constantly being threatened to not intervene at all. And at the same time, you also had the US funding Israel, which, of course, the Israeli aggression on Syria started long before Barak Hussein, but also coincidentally, it intensified in 2011 when they were having their revolution, and they launched hundreds of airstrikes on Syria during that time. So these are just only two examples. Like if we look at the US hand in this destabilization of the whole Arab region, I mean, it's terrifying. But it's also ironic that the US will not intervene in Syria while they're being massacred and tortured by Bashar. But at the same time, they have no problem intervening in Egypt while we're actually doing so well. So it sounds suspicious, no? Yeah.
I can give it up to someone else if someone wants. maybe Ilu. She was.
No. No, go on, Peter.
Hi, my name is Peter. I'm from the U.S. All right, go on. Yeah, I had so many questions, but I'll try and narrow it down to one. But I find something interesting about like this current like era that we're in with this kind of global cooperation of like these right-wing organizations, but it's primarily like top-down, organized by like rich capital essentially, but it also is like motivating these like I would say like ground level dissatisfactions that like are being funneled into this right-wing pipeline. And I find it quite interesting, especially now where it's like it's hyper focusing on these like nationalist sentiments of like sovereignty and like, oh, we're taking our country back for ourselves. But then at the same time, at least with the US and with Trump kind of accelerating this to the most extreme, it's turning in on itself where you have, you know, the right wing of the US is now attacking Europe essentially and like lashing back on Europe in order to try and secure its own nationalist desires essentially. And I was wondering if like you've been seeing here in Europe or like in any other places, but primarily Europe, because Europe has been so long allied with the US, and I think nationalists in here always thought, okay, yeah, the nationalists will always, like everyone, it's always going to be good as long as we pursue these. But now it's coming to the point where nationalisms are colliding with each other, and I was wondering, do you see that being like a key area where like the dialogue or where like your strategies can come in, or like in the future do you see this becoming like a bigger rift that could destabilize these kind of networks that are forming?
Sorry, that was a complex question. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you apart that colonialism still exists and is very strong. Of course, we live in this game. I'm not sure I can tell you any more thing. But maybe one thing is that I do believe in civil society to be a very, very, very strong force, especially when you have a country where there's a lack of democracy. What was called the Arab Springs. I try not to use this sentence because Arab Springs is like exotic for the West. You know, oh, it's spring, it's blooming, there's flowers. No, people are dying. Yeah, I think that trusting civil society, empowering civil society, funding civil society is what is much needed right now, especially in Egypt and as well in Lebanon. And Macron actually went to Lebanon and said, oh, we're going to fund civil society. And he never did it. And Peter, okay, the right-wing organizing, nationalism, the word is messy, we're doomed. Thank you. I think one of the big weapons that we have is that we can organize an international. There is this well, how can I say that? During hi, during many years, the communists had l'international communist, the international communist, and 26 years ago in the city in Paris at the Grand Palais. There was Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, Lionel Jospin, like all the leftists, all together saying a big speech, like it's the international left. Wow, so powerful. Now we have the international fascist, and we don't have any strong international political left. We don't have international progressive. We have nobody working on that. Like nobody is working on that. Like I could quote some examples, but it's so small. But we have leaders. We have Pedro Sanchez, let's say Macron to some extent. But also, no, if we talk about the left should unite. Who is putting on the same stage leaders from all the left to make coalition, to strategize, to think about what's going on? Nobody. And I think this is where there is a big hole, is that no one is taking this into account to take have an international left of politicians and train them and make sure they get access to the same knowledge, to talk to each other and to strategize together. I think that would be a wonderful answer. I've been speaking with former Prime Minister of Greece, Tsipras, about that. He's organizing conferences every year to gather them, like there was Eli Schlein from Italy, Martin Schulz, François Hollande, etc. But that's just a conference. We need way more than that, and very few are doing this.
Very, very short questions. First, very short, because we have 10 minutes for everything.
Okay. Can I start? Okay, my name is Brianna. I'm from Brazil also, and I would like to ask you about the fact that you said it's really important for us to resist and protect the rights we have. And what would be the case when, for example, we don't have these basic rights? Because in Brazil, for example, abortion is illegal. We have some exceptions, and even though if you get pregnant because you were raped, you need to go to trial, you need to expose yourself and depend on someone to be nice enough and rational enough to allow you to do it. I have this impression that we are pushing the bar lower and lower, trying to protect what we already have, and there is no much space for us to try to push for something that would be the basic in some places, but not really being expressed in others. The approach would be the same, you think, or is needed something else? Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Sophie. I'm from Belgium and Rwanda. So I have two questions, very quick. First of all, you talked a lot about the Trump coming on and reducing like the overtone window, but I was wondering what other mechanism and causes like this general crisis. Is it like a cycle? Is it like we're repeating ourselves because we're humans and we're kind of dumb and we're doing the same thing that we did 100 years ago? But is it like, but what do you think about that? And also secondly, I would want you, because you talked a lot about like what is going on in France, and France I think is a big influence in Europe, and even though it's like losing influence in the world, but in Europe it does. And so I'm very scared of what is going on like for the next elections in 2027. So I was going to I'm just asking you, what do you think? Is it like the next president that we have here in France is going to be far right, probably, and what is going to happen? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nicolau from Spain. I was surprised that you say that Pedro Sanchez was a leftist. I will not personally like, because you spoke like as a leader in the left. I mean, he makes sure that there was no more left in Spain, and I think this also sets like one very important question, because you spoke from France, who is like very like active, proactive society in general, but in Spain, like unions had been decimated for years. Like governments do nothing, and like the also like the online thing that you mentioned before, it's also mainly taken by the far right. So I mean, I don't see like any clear option in Spain right now. And do you see an option? Because like social democracy clearly fails at some point, because you cannot rebuild from that because you run out of options, and there is no proper like alternative in Spain for the coming, like probably depending on the next elections, which I think he will lose, and there will be no more options for years. So maybe some comments on that.
My question is to stay on what you were saying about there's no international left while the right works together globally, and I would like to know your opinion on the role of unions and like parties on that, because I was reading about the life of Flora Tristan, which is like a French feminist from, I don't know, 200 years ago, but she was really visionary in like putting the worker in the center of the equation. So that, and also relating to the way the younger generations participate in politics, because I think in a really broad sense we kind of lost hope, or were convinced to lose hope in parties and unions. Yeah.
Ukraine? Yeah. Ukraine. You cannot say no to Ukraine.
Very short. Okay, my question is about social media platforms, because a lot of politicians, philanthropists, and actors, they promote their narratives on social media. And for example, it became a very big issue, especially in the wartime, because we see a lot of accounts sponsored to promote pro-Russian narratives. But for example, if even me like posting some news about the war, like how Russia is bombing our buildings, etc., it can be seen as like sensitive content. It's prohibited and etc. So and basically it's not it really can be regulated, because there are a lot of like cases of the Supreme Court that sued the X or Instagram and etc., but they didn't like this big tech companies, they didn't even like react properly. They could find the ways to omit these things. So like my question is about how do you think it can be really regulated, and if there's an organization who has the power to regulate it.
Okay, good luck.
No. No. I'm sorry. On that, I really think that Europe is a big light in the dark. Not a big, small, but we are trying to regulate tech. We are the only continent that is actually doing it with the Artificial Intelligence Act, RGPD. It's so small, so small. If tomorrow, maybe you followed this judge from an international court that is under sanction from the US, from one day to another, he saw all his American services cancelled, so he has no access to Visa, MasterCard, Airbnb, Booking.com, Meta, social media, anything is out. So I think that those platforms and websites, they have so much power, and nothing can regulate them unless the European Union. And it's slow. And we have the far right trying to dismantle the European Union. We have Putin trying to dismantle the European Union, and now we have the US trying to dismantle the European Union. Like, to me, Europe, the EU, is like the last light in this fucking fucked up world. So, and I'm not so happy either with the left that we have, Nicolas, really. I'm not happy at all. I mentioned François Hollande, and David was like, dude, François Hollande. And I'm like, yeah, right, okay. But we play with what we have. Like I see hope in Mamdani, I see hope in other future leaders, and I see hope in front of me. This is not, and this is my conclusion to that. It's not an hazard that I created an academy for future leaders. Why? When I came back from the US with my year with President Obama, I thought, okay, I will do politics myself. And then I thought, okay, if I enter a system that is already corrupted, political parties that are already corrupted, right, left, no matter what, I want to make a difference, and in the end, I will become just like them. So I need to launch an army. I need to create an army. I need to make sure that we are not alone, that we go into politics, because the far right is preparing, and we have a massive, beautiful generation of people like you, because we had the climate activist movement since 2015. We had Me Too. Guys, we had Me Too. We did it. Like, now it's not okay to be sexist. We have masculinist coming, but we had Me Too. We had like so many new ways of being engaged. We have determination. I don't like when people tell me, oh, young people are not engaged. Yes, young people are so engaged. They're so determined. They're fury. We need them to go into politics. We need them to go in unions. And then the people would say, no, politicians are corrupted. I don't want to go into political parties. They're horrible. And you know what, guys? We are not here to take a cup of tea. It's about taking power. So if we're not happy with the parties, you go there, we fight, we take power in the party, we change the parties. And if we're not happy with politicians we go there, we fight, and we take power. Because in the end, we have the politicians we deserve by not getting engaged. And when at the end of the day, when all the disgusted are gone, remains only the disgustant. So we need to take power. That's my answer to all the last questions. This is what I do with my school. This is what I want people to do with other means and activism. And because we are together, we can create coalition. And I will end this session with this sentence. History has always been doing zigzag, you know, it zigs, it zags. We do 3 steps forwards, 2 steps backwards. But in the end, ultimately, we go in the right direction. Don't forget that we talk about democracy. Democracy as supposed to be invented in Athens 3,000 years ago, when only 2,000 white old men could vote. No. Democracy is the fact that I have the right to vote. It's only 2 minutes in the scale of human history. The fact that that people of color have the right to vote has been only 3 minutes in the human history. We have so many obstacles and challenges. It's going to be horrible. Yeah, but it has always been like that. And this is how we made so many progresses, because look at where we are now compared to 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, etc., etc. And maybe I won't see the change I want to see while I'm alive. Maybe it will be my son. Maybe it will be the son of my son. But in the end, I would have contributed. So thank you.